Julieta by Pedro Almodovar.
Alors bonjour.
Hello.
Ça y est, c'est bon?
Is everyone all set? I think we can get going then.
Merci.
Thank you.
Merci, merci, merci.
Thank you to the photographers.
N'oubliez pas d'éteindre les portables.
Please remember to switch off your cell phones
Et pas des flashs après pour
and
les photos. Vous connaissez mieux
don't
que moi
use
la-
flashes when the
mécanisme.
press
Nous
conference
sommes
is
donc ici
underway.
pour la conférence
We're
de
here
presse
for the press
du
conference
film Julieta
on the film Julieta
de Pedro Almodovar.
by Pedro Almodovar.
J'ai l'avantage de que tout le monde qui est à table, vous les avez vus dans le
Everyone
film, sauf un.
with me here appeared in the film, except
je
for
commence
one
par,
person. So I'll
Le
start
plus lointain de moi,
with
certain
the
Agustin
far side,
Almodovar,
Agustin
qui est producteur et
Almodovar,
acteur.
who is a producer.
à ses côtés,
Next to
deux
him,
comédiennes
we
qui font
have
histoire.
two
auprès
well-known
du public
actresses,
espagnol, Inma Cuesta,
extremely well-known in Spain,
Michel
Inma
Jenner.
Cuesta and Michel Jenner.
Elle fait histoire. Elle fait histoire dans le cinéma de Pedro Almodovar.
She has gone down in the history of Pedro Almodovar's films, Rossy de Palma. Perhaps it's you who should introduce me.
À côté,
And
Daniel Grao.
next to her, we have Daniel Grao,
Et ensuite, les deux visages de
followed by the two faces of Julieta, Adriana Ugarte,
et Emma Suarez.
and Emma Suarez.
Voilà. Et le chef d'orchestre, Pedro Almodovar.
And, of course, the orchestra conductor, so to speak, Pedro Almodovar.
Permettez-moi de poser la première question, Pedro.
I would like to ask the first question.
Esta es tu 20ª película. Ya van 20. Es algo que tienes presente en el espíritu.
You've had 20 films. What do you keep in mind when you are carrying out a new film? The fact that this is going to be the 20th film, did that mean it had to be a special type of project? No, I began to realize that it was number 20 actually when I had finished the film. No, it doesn't in any way change my attitude when writing the script, nor when directing or editing the film at all. What is important in any film is actually the story itself. Can we take a first question from the audience?
Vous présentez, merci.
I am Untitled for Latin America. Should I do it in Spanish or English?
Puedes preguntar en castellano, sí.
Okay.
You can ask in any language you like, in Spanish if you like. All right. Pedro, Woody Allen has been here and Steven Spielberg, but out of competition, and even Woody Allen said that he doesn't believe in competitions. And yet you've got no problem at all at being here competing in festivals such as Cannes, especially after having had 20 pictures, no? I don't have Woody Allen's talent, nor the talent of Steven Spielberg. I respect the posture that both of them might have, but since I am here in Cannes, then I prefer to be here in competition, actually, because in any case, you are going to be seeing the film. There will be critique given of the film, and I prefer to actually be in the competition. I think it's more exciting, actually, for me, as well as for the media. And in any case, it shows that I am not any sort of sacred cow here, that I'm not necessarily at the level of those films that are not in competition.
Excusez-moi. Oui, bonjour, Jean-Marc Le Squarmec, La Dépêche du Midi, France.
Jean-Marc Squarmec. I would like to put a question to Pedro Almodovar on the aesthetics of the film, and above all, your taste for colors, very striking colors. There's a lot of red and orange in the film and strong blues. How do you choose the main colors of your films? They are very important, the colors, of course, in your films. And what led you to choose Jean-Claude Larieux, with whom you're working for the first time? Jean-Claude Larieux is sitting right at the front of the room.
Jean-Claude had already worked with us, actually, or he'd worked with El Deseo in 2 other films, both of which were directed by Isabelle Couchette. And we liked his work quite a bit. As far as the colors go, well, let's see if I can find a rather quick, brief answer, but I'm not really sure I have a good, quick answer. I'm the son of Technicolor. The first movies that I remember when I was a child were in Technicolor, with very bright, contrasted colors. So when I began to make films, I was trying to look for the same color that you see in Technicolor, but of course that's impossible, just due to chemistry. And you know that my films can be somewhat Baroque sometimes. And of course I'm a child of the 60s, so my training is in pop art. All of this led to a certain exaggerated use of color in my films. And this is the answer I always give because I think that's what best explains my use of color. When I was doing Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown, I realized that my mother had dressed in black because she was in mourning, which of course tradition obliges you to wear black, and she was doing so since she was 3 years old. And when she conceived me, she was wearing black at that moment when she conceived me. Of course, I only found this indirectly, not from her directly. I found it out indirectly later on. So the fact that I was actually conceived by someone wearing that color, my mother, gestation happened, giving some sort of answer of rage against that horrible tradition that black has, because black is something that we see a lot here on the red carpet. It's a wonderful, glamorous, sophisticated color, except when it's imposed on someone from the time you're a child. In that respect, it's actually a curse.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Acá.
Hello, I'm over here. Ernesto Guerra from the Mercurio in Chile. I wanted to ask you, Pedro, about the script writing process. This, of course, is material that comes from another source. Can you tell us a bit what that was like? And the fact that you, once again, were making a film with a very women-centered point of view. And how you make films with women. Yes, thank you very much. As you all know, the origin is 3 short stories by the Canadian writer Alice Munro. When I read those short stories, I was fascinated by them, especially by one particular short story. And so I tried to unify them so that they would have one main character, which is Julieta. That was really one of the main problems I had, because these were actually 3 independent short stories. But when I realized I wanted to shoot the film in Spain, and therefore I needed to adapt it to Spanish culture and to Spanish geography, which was very different from the Canadian situation. At that moment, I chose to more or less forget Alice Munro, although of course she is still there present within the film, but I began to think about where would these characters lead me. So once again, I think I've come back to a place that I'll never leave altogether. altogether, which is the universe of women, the feminine universe. I've done lots of movies about mothers, but I believe this mother, the mother of this movie, Julieta, if we compare her with other mothers, she's the most vulnerable mother, the weakest, with the least capacity to fight. She resists passively and with desperation, if that's actually possible for something like that to exist. And that's saying, if we compare her to all the other mothers from my films, who are all powerful women with an ability to struggle, which seems above human. But Julieta, well, in thinking about her character as a scriptwriter, I turn her into the victim of losses that happen throughout her life that begin to sap her power as a person. And of course, the very last scenes, interpreted by Inma Suarez, she's almost like a zombie that walks through the streets without any particular direction and without hope. Salvador Franco from Mexico. I wanted to ask the actresses and Pedro, how did you work on the creation process for creating a character that is actually created by 6 different hands, not 4 hands, but 6 hands, of course, are involved. And this is something that hasn't happened very much in the history of filmmaking. So did you all get together, you 2 actresses together with the director to figure it out? And another question to Pedro, why do you have the song by Chavela Vargas at the end of the song? And I know that it's true that she's a very good friend of yours. Well, let me talk first about the song by Chavela Vargas, and then I'll let the ladies also answer their question. I wanted to be very restrained or held back in the way I did this film. And I was thinking not to include any songs at all at first. I always had that song by Chavela Vargas in mind, because that song specifically, what it says in the song is the lyrics, or the contents more or less of the lyrics, could be part of the dialogue of the leading character played by Inma Suarez at that moment. So at the very end of the film, well, it's an ending which is open to hope, even though it's not an entirely happy ending. And so I thought it to be quite appropriate that Chavela's voice would lead to or speak to that reserved emotion throughout all the film. She says, Chavela says, if you were to leave me at that very moment, I would die. Those words I thought were the best words and the best voice to describe the movie, thanks to my friend Chavela Vargas.
Buenos días, bonjour. Nosotras trabajamos.
Hello. Well, the 2 of us worked independently on the 2 ages of Julieta. The connection was actually Pedro. In terms of the adult Julieta, which of course is the role I play, Pedro gave me a lot of different references by writers, by painters, movies, actresses that he thought could be essential for the makeup of the character, for the understanding of the character, because I had to find that region, that area of loneliness, the anxiety and anguish of abandonment of Julieta. And this was a process that I had to be very careful about, and I had to take my time. I had to try to really get to the bottom of things, really go deeply into the loneliness of the character. Amongst the references that we talked about, for example, there's the Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. That helped me a lot. There's also the book by Emmanuel Carrère, which is called Other Lives But My Own. There's films such as Europa 51 by Rossellini with Ingrid Bergman. There's The Hours as well, and then Joan Moreau as well. This may seem strange, but I like a lot how she walks, which is basically what's happening throughout the entire movie, and how their character actually had to walk. It wasn't an attempt actually to imitate Jean Moreau, but it was just the fact that walking actually should have a certain intention in it, and that it should be expressive. Oh, excuse me for interrupting you. No, thank you. There was Lucian Freud as well, Antonio Lopez. These were all these different references that Pedro gave me, because Pedro's a director who can give you lots of information and examples and reference points. And he can give you a lot of ideas to be able to create the character and enter into their universe. Adriana, hello. Good day to everyone, and thank you. Yes, it's a little bit like what Inma has just been saying to you all. It is true that when Inma realized that I was going to be playing Julieta in the earlier part of her life, she called me up because, of course, we knew each other. She called me very excited, very happy, and we wanted to actually get together and say, let's work together in creating the character of Julieta. But when we met together with Pedro, we realized that actually that process would be actually different. We had a lot to learn, and we had a lot to listen to. So for me, it was a process. Of course, there were lots of references, but there were also a lot of surprises. I had to constantly relearn everything and leave behind those tools that I thought I had. Leave them behind and begin with very intense and long rehearsals in which the actor thinks, you as the actor think you're defining the person, but you begin the first day of shooting and you realize, no, Pedro is remaking, reconstructing, reinventing the character every single day. And that's why it's such a stimulating and exciting exercise, something very enjoyable to be doing next to him. But of course, there's makeup, hairdressing, wardrobe. Yes, we wanted to make sure that there was a certain consistency in the change. We worked together a lot with those departments. Yes, all of them, wardrobe, lighting, they were all important because, of course, without proper photography or cinematography, you couldn't construct this fantasy. But Pedro, did you know from the very beginning that you were going to use two different actresses? Well, not from the very beginning, no. The first draft of the script, since of course this was based on Alice Munro, I was hoping to do the film in English, and not really in Canada, but rather in New York, because I'm more familiar with New York. And I even spoke with one actress, an American actress, who was delighted with the idea of working together with me. But I didn't feel very sure of myself once I started looking at the material in English, and I decided not to do it. Because when you've got even a little bit of doubt, of course, you have to adapt it after the first draft. And after the first couple years, Lola and Barbara, my assistants, and everything that we are doing throughout this day, I would like to dedicate everything to them and to Agustin as well, who's having a birthday. So I'm not going to ask you right now, not yet, I'm not going to ask you yet to sing happy birthday, maybe later. So Lola and Barbara, they said to me, why don't you re-lead the first draft of the script, which was really nice. And I said, yeah, but a Spanish family is very different from a Canadian or American family. Our culture in Spain, the culture of our families is very different in Spain. In America, a mother knows that at some point her children are going to go to university, which means they're going to become independent. They're going to leave home. And they might see their children very little at that point on. But in Spain, we never break ties with our family members, even if you leave home. So I read it and tried to see if there was a way for me to adapt the script to Spain. And that's when I finally wrote the final script, and I realized at that point that it would be two different actresses. I'm not the first person to do that. There's Luis Buñuel, and who did it in a much more radical way in that Dark Object of Desire with Angela Molina, for example, and another actress who were playing two different ages. But I wanted to do it in a different way. Adriana was the woman from who grown up in who was free of prejudice, who was a very open, independent woman. And if we look at Inma, she's a woman, I won't say how old she is, but she's a woman who's had some experience. And she has that in her gaze, which is something which you can never change with makeup. So I'm very happy now that I did it that way, that it's two different actresses. I think that is actually some wealth, that adds wealth to the two different ages of the actress.
From Film School Rejects in Canada. I was wondering, Mr. Almodovar, if you could talk a little bit more about Alice Munro's stories that you adapted here. Where did you find these stories, and what was it about them that made you want to turn it into a film? Thank you.
In general, you mean in general, or for this picture?
For this particular film.
Well, la idea original está en...
Well, the original idea comes from the stories by Alice Munro. She's Canadian. There are three different short stories that are found in the book called Runaway. It is true, though, that aside from the series of sequences of the movie that take place in the train, everything is really, in a way, my own, because I am not usually very faithful when I adapt someone's text. I admire Alice Munro quite a bit, but I knew that if I wanted to do it in Spanish, I would have to bring it to my home territory. So I'm not sure if you're talking about the what aspects of the visual aspects or the contents
in this movie, or something else.
Well, what was it about these stories that made you want to make it into a film?
Perdón. Bueno, en principio, como te he dicho,
well, basically, as I was saying, I wanted to do a movie in a train. I was fascinated by the possibility to be able to shoot in a train, which at the end of the day ended up being really difficult to do. It's a tiny space being in a train compartment. But since I'm a whimsical child, I wanted my train. And Alice Munro gave me one of the scenes, or a series of scenes, that was some of the most marvelous things I'd ever read in my life, and happened in a train. One can compare it to the two main characters in Alfred Hitchcock's film, Strangers in a Train. That was really the driving force behind my idea. Alice Munro is a woman that I admire very much. She was a housewife, and that's basically what I am as well. A housewife who writes. All day long she's thinking over and over about the story that she wants to write, but she hasn't got time to write it because she's got 4 kids, and 4 kids take up a lot of time. And so during the nap time or at night, she's thinking about how to write these families that happen within the family. But of course, when she actually sits down and writes the stories, she's already created them in her head. And in putting them down on paper, it's only a part of that story that's put down on paper. That's the way she works. And for me, it's quite clear that there's a great deal of mystery in the short stories by Alice Munro. I get to the idea that when I get to the end of one of her stories, I know less than when I began to read the story. All of that was very exciting for me. And so I asked for the rights to use her stories. In this case, it was particularly one of the short stories by Alice Munro that I wanted to use, but I began to incorporate all sorts of things. I could read a news article in a newspaper, it might be some other story I'm reading, a movie that I've watched, and I'm always taking notes, writing things down, because otherwise I might forget. I might have heard a conversation by chance on the street. I might have had a nightmare, or my own fears when I'm awake. So my inspiration comes from all of these sources. The reality, though, here was a book which gave me a chapter, or it could be just the first paragraph from one of the short stories. But then I take charge of telling the rest of the story. I want to know what is moved in me, and that's why I actually write the story. And I will try to be a bit shorter with my answers.
Thank you very much for your beautiful film on guilt also.
Thank you.
There has been some controversy around the Panama Papers. Do you think that people are rightly concerned with that? And what's your response on that?
Mira, ¿puedo decir
Dime exactamente la pregunta cuál es.
Can you tell me exactly what your question is?
Do you think that people are rightly concerned around the controversy around Panama Papers and that it might hurt the public relations around this film?
Moi, je veux mettre à l'aise Pedro Almodovar. Il répond s'il veut, mais
Pedro Almodovar can answer if he wants, but may I remind you that a press conference here in Cannes is on the film. We're actually talking about the film.
Sabes, lo que pasa es que tu pregunta es muy general.
The thing is that your question is maybe a bit too general. My name, as well as the name of my brother, are some of the least important names that appear in the Panama Papers. If the Panama Papers were a film, our names would appear. We wouldn't even be extras in that film if the Panama Papers were a film. But one of the problems is that the Spanish press has been treating us as if we were the leading roles in the Panama Papers, and that's not fair. But your question is a bit general, and it includes so many different aspects, what you're asking. So Panama Papers and so many names involved in it, we don't even actually know what this is actually all about. There hasn't been enough investigation or research carried out yet. So it didn't stop you from seeing the film, did it? You even liked the film, didn't you? So that's what I'm hoping will happen with the rest of moviegoers.
Rodrigo Fonseca, TV Globo, Brasil. Em Brasil, tu és uma leyenda, todos te amam.
You're a legend in Brazil, where I'm from. Everyone loves you in Brazil. I would like you to speak a little bit about Alberto Iglesias's music. You worked with Alberto Iglesias. Secondly, in film universities in Latin America, especially in Brazil, they say that there is a new genre, meta-melodrama, and that you've inspired this meta-melodrama. Could you talk to us about what you think about melodrama in general and the role that melodrama has today in film? You remember, Pedro, that you promised you would give a very brief answer. Well, let's see. I've been working for 20 years with Alberto Iglesias. He's the person, perhaps, throughout my career to whom I've been the most faithful. He's such a lovely human being and such an excellent professional that when he saw the first edited version of the film, he said to me, Pedro, I don't think it needs any music at all. And that's not anything a musician normally will say to you. And I thought that to deal with the passage of time from one age to another, normally they wouldn't tell you that. So it was very difficult, the work we did together at first. For 3 months, I couldn't really even find the proper way of thinking with the music. And at some point, I brought him something from Teruko Takemitsu, a Japanese musician, who did the music of Run by Kurosawa. So I let him listen to that music, and Alberto realized that, help me, I'm forgetting now the name of the composer. Death in Venice is by Mahler, yes, of course, Mahler. Mahler was the great inspiration for this Japanese composer. So he moved towards the direction of Mahler and found this music. In terms of your question about melodrama and me and Brazil, something that I was very grateful for, well, Caetano Veloso said to me, Pedro, you are a Brazilian director. And I said I was glad to hear that. If Caetano Veloso, who is a great humanist, says something like that, then I'm going to say he's definitely right. But it has to do with the Baroque nature that my melodramas have. There's a Spanish writer, Vicente Molina Foix, who long ago defined or coined the term Almodrama. And that can lead perhaps to some misunderstandings, but in any case, I thought it was a very good way to define a type of film. In my melodramas, there are lots of songs, the exaggerated colors as well that we mentioned. The characters also have very strong personalities. They never hide their feelings at all. There's no Puritan attitude, for example, in the way that we develop the characters. And yet, for me, this film that you're going to be seeing, Julieta, for me is not almodrama, it's not meta-drama. Maybe it is meta-drama, who knows, or a meta-melodrama. But what I was trying to do was to create a drama which would be very restrained, very temperate, very somber, because that's what the story was actually asking of me to create.
Bonjour. Bonjour, Dean Delcroix pour Blind Magazine.
Blind Magazine, I have a question to Mr. Almodovar. Your characters are often artists, that is, singers, directors, script writers, painters. Do you identify particularly with these characters? And which of your characters, whatever the film, resembles you most?
De todas mis películas. Pues la verdad es que yo me identifico con todos los personajes de...
I feel identified with all of the characters of my films. For the best and for the worst, they all represent me in one way or another. As we mentioned at the beginning, I've made 20 films. So Julieta is very different from Broken Embraces, for example, which was very different from The Skin I Live In, which was very different from... excuse me, I got the order wrong. First came, in the past came The Skin I Live In, and before that was Broken Embraces. But in any case, those characters are very different from, or those films are very different from Julieta, but amongst them, there are like 20 different steps that all represent me. I have never written any sort of autobiography, and I've never let any of the publishing houses write any biographical books about me, and that'll be in my will as well, that no one's allowed to write any biographies. I do not want either authorized or non-authorized biographies about me. And those of you, please, who are the journalists of the future, please don't let anyone do a biopic about me. I would really ask you, please, to promise me that right now. And also pass on the message to future generations that my life is in these 20 films. I could speak about all the aspects of my life based on moments and scenes from these films. So there are various... it's not director or film directors that I think represent me the most. In this movie, my heart, and even something more than just my heart, is in the more mature age of Julieta. I think that's what I feel most identified with right now. My name is Maria Guerra. I'm from Cadena SER in Spain. I wanted to ask you about the issue of time. For me, this movie has a lot to do with time. Inma, sometimes she doesn't speak at all, but she shows the tragedy of the passage of time. I'd like you to speak a little about what importance time has for you and how time got into this film, or how we see it in the film. Well, for me, the passage of time, I'm a bit older than most of you, so I think I might know it a bit better than most of you, but it's not that I feel like an old man, but I'm getting there. And I agree with what Phil Roth said. Age is not an illness, but rather it's a massacre. That's how I kind of experience the passage of time right now. I never would have been able to make this film before now, where I'm 60-something years old. Even if I had tried to make a film based on the same short stories, I think that film earlier would have been very, very different. I'm not a nostalgic person, but I very much miss my youth, and I miss those years of my youth, which I'm sure you're familiar with as well, the 80s. I miss the 80s.
Hay un momento en mi caso, digo que he tenido que decidirme por.
There was a point at which I had to make a choice for health, which is a bit boring. Choosing health is boring, but it's necessary if you want to keep working. But it's a sad decision as well.
Y yo creo que esa sensación impregna.
And I think that feeling can be found in the works that I'm creating now in this decade of my life. In terms of your question about the presence of time itself in the film, Adriana is the Julieta from the 80s. She's a woman who's free, very free as women were in the 80s. Lots of things I said to Adriana, I didn't say them so much to Inma, but I did to Adriana, had to do with explaining what young women were like in the 80s. Because the young women nowadays, such as her right now, they're very different. The world they've lived in is very different from the world of the young women in the 80s. So for me, this character, at the beginning of the film, she's completely open to the idea of adventure. But time, as well as small circumstances that have to do with her personal experience, well, she suffers quite a bit. The film is one in which fate is very much present. They're not women who have created big mistakes and therefore deserve big punishments. Because I don't even like to think about the cause and effect relationship. You make a mistake and then you're punished for it. I don't like to think about things that way. But they are punished by life. And it's an incredible punishment that life gives them. And that's what means that this film is actually a tragic drama. Before passing to another question, there are two actresses here who are extremely popular in Spain, in cinema, as well as in television, for historic roles as well. That's why I say that they're historic actresses, very important actresses in Spain. And a silly question I wanted to ask you was, what impressed you most about your first experience here in the movies with Pedro?
Hola.
Hello. Oh, now suddenly I'm feeling a bit shy. Me, I was impressed by everything from the start. It was quite impressive for me to actually meet him, for him to be able to take a look at me, to participate in the film. I was excited when he told me that I would be in the film and to be able to see how he works. And things that sometimes other people might not notice, but that I like a lot in his films. Everything has a reason for being there. From a decoration to a painting found on the wall, everything is there for a reason. And I think that these are all ideas that clearly come from someone who is a genius. And it's fantastic to be able to see how he works and how he directs a film. Thank you very much. Well, me, I was quite surprised by the sense of humor. I think there was a lot of humor throughout the creative process, even though it is a dramatic film. I laughed a lot during the making of the film. And in my character, I liked a lot that Pedro said that I needed to train myself in that artistic aspect of Ava, that I had to understand how she works, and I felt very identified with that. And that I also liked the fact that he trusted me to interpret Ava throughout all the stages of her character. And I know that even though I don't have the age that she had at all the points in the film, I tried to do my best. But what I liked the most was the sense of humor. I feel very identified with that sense of humor that he puts into the work he does, which really helps you to work yourself and to create something. And were you worried, Daniel, about having to work together with Pedro? Worried? Not at all. It was really stimulating. I got really excited, really turned on by the idea of working with Pedro. And I knew that he would have that sense of humor, and it's just a complete show to watch him work, because you look that he brings together intelligence and humor, and those two actually very often go hand in hand, I think, and it was great to be part of that world, and it was an incredible present that he gave me, allowing me to participate. No, thank you to you, Daniel. And Rossy, of course, we recognized you despite the makeup. I'm not sure how we were able to do so. Oh, I'm glad you recognized me. What was that like for you to change the register? Well, it actually felt quite natural for me. I just completely let myself go with Pedro. Perhaps with a different actor, I might have said, I'm not so sure I like what you're doing with my hair in the film here. But no, I had a great time. I felt very comfortable as well. All of us have in our lives an aunt or a grandmother. I was reminded of family members that I have. And it was also an incredible team in hairdressing and in makeup that we worked with. I had a great time as well. We played a lot with this character. It's true that we had lots of really funny ideas of things we could do with the character, but we couldn't put them into the film. But it was tempting to do so, but we didn't do it. In any case, though, it was really a great pleasure. I'm not very glamorous in the film, but I'm delighted to have been in it. I'm sure in the next film, you will be very glamorous, I promise. So, a last question. Hello, I'm from Mexico. The dog in the film is called Canelo, and that's the name of the dog that appears in the movie Adriana. Is that by chance? I think it's always a fantastic opportunity to be able to offer homage to Luis Buñuel, but Canelo is actually a very common name for dogs in Spain. And in this case specifically, my brother-in-law's, my sister-in-law had the idea. That would be Agustin's wife. How's the festival going for you, by the way, Agustin? And your kids are here as well. I suppose you must feel proud of the film, otherwise you wouldn't have brought your kids, would you? That's right, of course I feel proud. No, Agustin doesn't like to speak very much, does he? No, Agustin never wants to say anything. No, I've been enjoying this press conference quite a bit, I can tell you. So, yes, Luis Buñuel was very much present in my head, and he deserves any homage that any director could give him, any tribute. No, but they asked you why you put Agustin as the ticket taker in the train. Oh, no, he forced that on me. Agustin is the only actor who appears in all 20 of my films, from the very first one, from Pepe Lucy Bom, to the end. He has fun doing it. He likes to be there in roles that only appear for a moment in the film, and so I've been giving him those roles, of course. So he played the role of the train conductor, and it had to do also with the amount of space that he takes up. I thought it was the best role for him, because if he were even a bit fatter than he is, he wouldn't have been able to fit into the train. There was also a tribute to Alfred Hitchcock, no? The fact that your brother is present in all your films. Yep, I don't really deserve to appear in all the films anymore, but my brother represents me. Well, thank you very much.
¿Cómo iba para media?
Me han pedido este paquete de esto, que es un adicional que habías pedido, ¿verdad?
¿Me había pedido para esta noche?
Sí.
Había pedido